What's up, guys? Welcome to a new episode of Founders Talk series, where me, Dmitry and my partner Kurt talk about business, software, healthcare, and everything in between. And today I want to talk about board members and how they can affect your business. So first of all, let's talk about if every business can form and have a board members, and what are the cases when businesses are actually forced to form a board. Kurt, what your experience says about this matter?
So yes, I'm happy to fill in on that today. And again, like with all of these little chats that we have, these are all based on our personal experience, and everyone's experience is going to be a little bit different because there's so many options for how these things can transpire and occur. But we'll give a little insight into what we've experienced directly. So boards are a really interesting thing in my experience. They can be very beneficial or they can be detrimental to a company. And I think today we'll kind of go into a few of those details. But to answer your first question in regards to, can any business form a board, and when are sometimes boards required? So in the short answer, yes, any business can have a board. And that's going to change depending on the structure of your business. So it's more common in the United States for corporations to have a board of directors. And those individuals can contribute in different ways to your company. But what's important to remember is that in some cases they're required, in some cases they're not. So it's very typical in public companies, for example, that boards are required. And private companies aren't going to have as much requirement for that because, again, they're private. Public scrutiny is obviously much higher. So when it comes to that, really kind of keep that in mind as you're growing your own company. If you're going to go down the corporate route and eventually the public route, boards are going to be very important. So it's important to start thinking about that from the beginning. Who you want on your board, how they're going to contribute. And then if you're going to stay private the whole time, well, then it's just optional based on how you want that board to assist with your company, because a lot of times they can provide a lot of great insight. They can help make sure that the company stays on track with whatever the current goals are or the current growth strategy is. And they can open up a lot of doors. Some of these board members can be subject matter expertise or bring their subject matter expertise into your company, bring their networks, bring their solutions, and really take your company to the next level.
And I'm curious, is there any typical structure of the board, and what would be the optimal amount or detrimental amount of board members?
Well, there's no specific structure that says you have to have this many people. There are some cases here now in the United States where we say that your board has to have a certain diversity. You have to have a certain number of women on your board, things like that. So that is something that's started to come up here in various companies. It depends on your corporate structure too, whether or not you're public or private, and depending on what state you're in. All of this stuff is jurisdiction based. So even when we say in the United States, it can still be completely different from one state to another. So, but as far as structure goes, that's really going to be up to you as a founder and with your partners, depending on how you're set up, or with your key investors. So it's usually a good idea to have an odd number on your board. That way you don't end up stuck in a constant tie. That's something important to avoid. And then you want to make sure you have good representation. So the board is usually going to be composed of inside directors, people who work for the company, senior executives, people who have day-to-day involvement. And then you'll have outside directors, and those will be individuals who might not be involved in the day-to-day operations, but can provide guidance or at least watching over how the company is being run to make sure that it's following what its original goals and mission are. So those are kind of the basic structure there. Sometimes the board structure can be defined in your company bylaws. In the United States, bylaws can be one of those things that really contribute a lot to the structure of the company and how it needs to be organized, who's running things and how they're running things. So it varies a little bit for each individual, but I would say, trying to keep an odd number of people is best, and you probably want to have something where you've got enough input from individuals to make sure that it's valuable. So having three board members might be a little bit small. 5 to 7 might be better, but you don't want to get it too large to where everything is a decision by committee and no decisions can be made. So if you have 15 members on a board and you're a small company, that probably is too many, and you're going to have too many opinions at any given time in order to make sure things run smoothly. So as your company grows and changes, that's how you'll change the structure of your board.
What would be the typical pros and cons of having a board, especially for the private company that doesn't have it as a mandatory part of its structure?
Sure. So let's start with the pros, and we kind of touched on some of these earlier. Is that the boards, they can bring individuals that have subject matter expertise. They can provide strategic guidance, and they can ensure accountability. That's always a big one, making sure that your other key day-to-day operators within the company are doing what they're supposed to. And then they can also bring new skills and perspectives to your company that you may not have internally. So that's really where they're good. They can also be great for enhancing reputation and credibility. So if you have people on your board that are well respected in the industry that you're working in, that can just lead to that additional credibility for vendors, for investors, for employees, and for other relationships to be like, oh, okay, this company is clearly committed to what they're doing. They've brought in professionals. They're operating in a way that's transparent and shows growth and strategy. So those are some of the positives of a board. Some of the negatives, like with anything, they can be expensive. Depending on how you have things structured, board members, they may be coming on for equity only in your company. They may be expecting some type of salary. And those, depending on the blend of that, can be difficult for your company in its early stages to maintain. So negotiating the right compensation package for your board is going to be important for long-term sustainability. But they can also be time-consuming to maintain, because now with a board, you need to have regular meetings, you need to have more documentation about what was discussed at those meetings, and then make sure that whatever outcomes are discussed are actually executed in the day-to-day operations of the company. So those are a couple little cons. There's also the problem of conflict of interest with boards. They make decisions that managers and other shareholders disagree with, but being in the board, they're usually directors within the company, so they have a little bit more control and say into what's going on. So there's always that possibility for friction to occur.
And is it even possible that board can actually damage business? Because we all know this famous story when Apple board actually fired Steve Jobs, which led to the company's stagnation for quite a lot of time before he actually came back. And if I remember correctly, it actually was Steve who initially hired those board members that kicked him out of his own company.
Yes, that's a great question and a great example. So yes, a board can damage a business. A board has a lot of power within the corporate structure. So if the board is making poor decisions, then yes, there can be a detrimental impact to the business in general. Also, if there's a lack of harmony within the board, if there's infighting or a lot of disagreement between board members or even between board and management, that can cause problems for a board as well. The Apple example is a great example of that. However, it's important to note that while a board can have a negative impact to a company and its growth, it can have a positive impact, because in that same example, let's say that you have a CEO or another executive leader who is just really a poor performer. It's the board's responsibility and duty to remove that person if they feel it's in the best interest of the company. So hopefully you've got the right board member the right board members with the right experience, the right background to be able to make these decisions that are beneficial for the company. And hopefully it doesn't lead to, you as CEO being removed yourself. But if it did, then maybe there's a good reason, or maybe it's one of those examples of a board having a negative impact on a company's overall growth and future.
So once the board is founded, is there any chance for founder to dismiss the board and get control back? And I'm talking about the board itself, because obviously there are some mechanisms to replace the people on the board, but is there a chance to remove the board itself? Or once it's formed, it's there for good?
Well, that's actually a really complicated question, because this is one of those things, again, it depends on your company structure. Are you a public company or a private company? Private companies are obviously going to have more leeway to do what they'd like to do. Public companies, you really have to get a lot more people involved a lot of the time, because now you're having to talk about getting shareholders involved in voting. Technically every year you're supposed to have a shareholder meeting where the shareholders get to vote on the board members. And that's usually where you have the opportunity to change out board members, but it's not common for you to dissolve the board entirely. I mean, I suppose you could replace everyone on the board, but to just remove the board entirely would be very, very uncommon. So a lot of this is also going to depend on the company bylaws and how those are configured and what it says you're allowed to do in regards to changing out, key executive members or changing out board members or other directors. So, that's really complicated. And in most cases with private companies, I'm going to say it's not done. It's just not typically done. Now, if a company were to be public and then go private again, then there might be an easier opportunity for removing the board and changing how you're configured. But in many cases, once a board is formed, it's just difficult to remove without a very compelling reason.
So guys, good luck with your businesses. Plan your board establishment wisely, because once formed, it will be really hard to get rid of them. If you like this video, please support the channel with like and subscription, and let us know in the comments below what else you would like us to highlight. See you!